Hey guys, how's it going? This is Mike from M&R Automotive. Today we have a RAM TRX and we're installing a 40-inch light bar.
Alright, first thing we're going to do is actually take out the inner fender protectors. All it is, it's 8mm screws. And there's 1, 2, 3. And these are the two inside ones that we're just going to loosen because you can slide them out. You can just shift the whole cover over it and remove it. So we're going to do the same thing on the passenger side. And the two that we're just loosening but not removing are inside. And what we're going to want to do is just slide the bracket up, align the holes with the bolts themselves, and just pull the shield out. Okay, next thing we're going to do, we're back on the driver's side. We want to disconnect all the wiring from the vehicle to the bumper. So now I'm just going to use a screwdriver to pick this under, and that's going to release the actual harness from the bumper to the rest of the vehicle. And you just press on it, and then they separate. There we go. So now that we've unplugged this harness, we can tuck it away, and now we have disconnected all electrical components from the bumper to the rest of the truck. Next thing we're going to do is remove 3 18mm nuts from the frame horns, and that's going to release the bumper. There's one on the inside and one on the bottom. So the outside ones are easier to get to, so we're going to get those first. And then the third one is a little bit tricky to get to. It's on the inside, but with the right socket, you can definitely get in there. I think it has to be a shallow socket, not a deep one. Since I'm going to still remove the bolts on the passenger side, I'm not going to release this nut all the way, so that way it's still holding the front bumper. So I'm going to back it out almost to the end, but I'm going to leave it still on. And then we're going to do that last after we loosen up the passenger side. Leave that on, and then let's go on the passenger side and do the same thing. The inner one is usually the trickier one to get. Let's see if I can back it out with my fingers now. So on the other side, we left this bolt slightly threaded, so that way it still holds on the driver's side. After I take this one out completely, we'll loosen the other side and we can go ahead and remove the bumper. So here it is. So now I'm going to go ahead and remove the last nut, and then we'll be able to slide the bumper forward off of the frame of the vehicle. Okay, so now that we have all the 3 bolts on each side removed, there it is. Okay, so now we're just looking at bolts that we can remove. We have to separate this top cover plate from the actual inner bumper itself. So we're just going to remove the outside bolts. Now we're going to go ahead and unclip all the harness. Anything from this plate that we're going to be removing. So probably this one comes off. And then coming back and just following all the clips. Okay, this is we're gonna leave. Probably take this clip off. Take away these 10mm screws. Let's take these bolts off. I'd have to take this bracket just to release here. Alright, let's do that. We'll take the harness out of the way, and then we'll take these bolts out. And do the same thing on this side. I'm going to take these 4 bolts on the bottom. On the top end, we have the plastic molding. We got to remove those clips and get it out the way. And there's 2. There are some more screws that we have to do on each side. Now, that's the top trim piece. You just squeeze it and it comes out. So now that we removed everything, we should be able to take the whole assembly out. So now that we have the inner piece of the bumper, we're going to go ahead and unclip the plastic trim pieces just to get to the inside of it. So now that we've separated the top into 2 pieces, we can go ahead and put this aside, and we're going to rethread the M&R supplied bolts in here, so that way we can attach the M&R mounts to it. So the threads that we're going to be reusing for this project is the top ones, so we're going to go ahead and use the supplied bolt and from the back side rethread into it, so that way we can use the M&R mount and connect it to it. Okay, that's one. And we have another one on the other side. And we're just going to thread this in. So I'm going to go ahead and mock up the bracket we're gonna fit a light bar through it, so that way we can adjust the width of the position itself, because right now there's still adjustability. And when we center it, we'll be able to mock up where these slits are going to be cut onto that plastic trim piece. So what you get with the M&R kit is 2 of these mounting bolts. You're gonna get a bolt and washer, thread it through the M&R bracket, put the spacer, and then thread it on one end of the light bar. Now we're gonna do the same thing on the other side. Bolt and washer with a spacer. So now we're capable of centering the kit, finding the center point, and tightening these bolts. So what we can do now, we can take this, we can mock up where our slits are going to be after we center it and get those cut. So the main reason we installed the light bar, so that way we can know the spacing on this slotted bracket. So now that we have this, it's centered, we can go ahead and remove it, put the plastic piece back in, and then cut the slit in the plastic in order for it to go through. Just go on the motto of measure twice and cut once. So that's why I wanted to make sure everything's centered, so that way I don't have to make the cut the second time. So now we can center this down the middle. So now the trim piece rests on the bracket. We'll be able to mark on it where the slit is supposed to be, so that way we can cut through it. I went ahead and flipped the piece over. You can see the markings that we did for our bracket. I'm gonna cut a slit in it so that way the bracket can squeeze in. You can use a Dremel tool, an oscillating tool, whatever type of cutting tools you have. I'm gonna actually use like a grinder, and it'll go through it like butter. It's very thin. Now I'm gonna go ahead and test fit it, and we're gonna see if we need to make it a little bit wider or longer. We need them a little bit wider. Okay, cool. We'll cut another piece, another slit. Oh, bam, almost. We're gonna make it a little bit more. So I'm gonna go ahead and make the incision a little bit deeper inside here. And there it is. So now we're gonna go ahead and do the same thing on the opposite side. Okay, so now that we have the brackets aligned and slotted through the trim piece, the only thing you want to make sure is on here that these clips, this is how they're going to get assembled back together, that they line up. Now that the brackets are installed and we cut the slits for them to come out through the trim, through the plastic trim, we're going to go ahead and reuse the hardware from before, the bolt and washer, the spacer, and we're going to go ahead and install this permanently. So the last thing to do is to drill a small hole for this wire to go through. So I'm gonna make a tiny hole here. It's plastic, so it should go fairly easy. And then we're gonna go ahead and feed the wiring from the light bar through that hole. And then we are going to connect it to the auxiliary switches when it's installed on the truck. Okay, so now that this is connected, we're gonna go ahead and put this cover back on that we have taken out in the previous steps. And these are just clips. So we're gonna go ahead and, I guess, work the edges and kind of go towards the center. All this stuff just clips on. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is actually reinstall these 10mm bolts that we have taken out from the previous step, so that way we know the actual alignment. Alright, so I got this in place, and we're gonna get the bolts that are holding that plastic trim piece. That's why I mentioned earlier, use these holes as guides so that way it aligns later on. Okay, good. Everything's great. Let's do 2 more and then we can reinstall this unit back into the bumper. So I wanted to show you how the whole unit looks assembled before we put it back inside the bumper. Notice that the M&R brackets, where they're positioned, they're right underneath the plastic cowl. All these are actually in place. We haven't had to remove it. The light bar sits right behind them. So now we're gonna go ahead and install the assembly back into the truck. kind of go around the harness, make sure all the holes line up. Okay, there we go. That's just this wire. The holes line up, which is good. The holes line up, and we're gonna start putting everything back together like it was originally. We're gonna go ahead and clip the harness back to this plate like it was before. Now that I'm done with assembling everything, I have 2 extra bolts, and these 2 account for the ones that replaced with the stainless steel ones from M&R. So that's one, and that's the second one. You can see that there is a bolt head here with a circle, and that's where these came from. So now that we have everything assembled, let's go ahead and reinstall the whole bumper back onto the truck. Trying to align the main bolts. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. So on the passenger side, I put one of the nuts on the bolts, so I know that on that side it's not going to fall on me. And now I can maneuver the bolts here. We finally aligned all the bolts and we got all of them on. I'm just finger tightening them on, and then I'm going to use some tools. Putting back all the frame bolts from the bumper to the frame. Don't forget to connect this. It's the only plug you have for all your connections. You just insert it and click it. Now I'm going to go ahead and feed the wire from the light bar up the fender and reach it in the engine bay, so that way we can connect it to the auxiliary switches. With the help of an assistant, have somebody reach it out. This is a single function light bar. The wiring of the light bar only has 2 wires. There's a ground and there's a positive. If you purchased a dual function light bar, there's going to be an additional wire, which is the blue wire, and you have to give it power as well if you want the second function to operate. So when you come to the left side of the battery, you do have a bundle of pink wires. Those are your auxiliary switches. We are going to connect the light bar to switch number 2. So based on this diagram, is going to be pink wire with a dark green tracer. So when looking at my wires, green tracer. So I'm going to go ahead and take this cover off. So we're going to grab a crimp connector. We're going to crimp it here. We are going to get our red wire. Okay. And then don't forget, there's also a ground. I'm going to install an eyelid first. We do have some grounding points here, so I'm going to go ahead and back this nut off. We're going to put the eyelid over the same bolt and reinstall the same nut. So now we can go ahead and test it. Looks like everything's wired perfectly. Switch number 2 is a pink wire with a green tracer, and now we have a 40-inch light bar in amber. Thank you guys for watching. I know you're going to love the product.